fundamental in the economy.
Well, I think we should all be reading NBR's Wealth Guide to 2011, which you're working on at the moment, Neville. Give us the latest inside information.
Well, we've got two. You see, we've got two. We've got one coming out in a few weeks' time, which really is looking at the state of the markets and how they've performed over the year. And really, it's been a strange one. You can't pick stocks. A lot of markets sort of going up and down, taking everything with them or going back, as James explained earlier in the program. So that's difficult because a lot of the fundamentals aren't coming through. But I think it's a matter of patience. I think a lot of companies have come through, and we've seen this in America as well, very well managed. They know the demand is going down, people are saving more, but they're getting ready. And you know, we haven't had a string of company collapses. There's very little negativity there. It's just a matter of waiting for that turn to come.
When you look at the balance sheets of the companies you've examined, how are they doing?
Oh, very well indeed. And when you look at a sector like retailing, there was one dog in the market, but when we looked at it, and skipped the dividend, but the others all paying high dividends. And if the dividend's related to the share price, you're getting very high yields. So if I was one of these South Canterbury investors, and I wasn't, I'd be putting money into those sort of sectors. Retail's got very good yields. You're almost cushioned against a drop in share prices, because if share prices fall too low and the company's well managed, it's going to be a takeover, and we've had those already.
James, in terms of the rural economy now, when you take a snapshot picture of the year, how are we doing, and what are you predicting for next year?
I think there's been a real shake-up over the past 12 months. You know, if you consider probably we talk a lot about the dairy sector, but last year we've had a $4.55 payout at the beginning of the season. A lot of farmers were underwater. They weren't going to make money. They were having to cut back and make some really tough decisions. But they got out of jail, I guess, in a lot of ways with a high payout. Ended up coming out at $6.70. But that's in the back of their mind. There's all the messages are coming through from the Reserve Bank and different parts of the economy to repay debt. So I think that's going to be a key. It's going to be a key issue for the rural sector. And then when you consider some of the other sectors, the beef and the sheep sector, wool's actually performing relatively well currently. But you know, the sheep and beef sector, then they're not making big returns because the dollar's really hampering farm gate prices, and they're still dealing with high inputs. So that particular sector's still finding it pretty tough, and I think relatively speaking, it's going to be a slow grind out for the rural sector. Okay,
let's talk your favourite tipple when it comes to wine. What do you like to drink, James?
I actually quite like a red. It's sort of a deep red. So that's probably my tipple.
And what about you?
Oh, there's nothing better than a really refreshing Sauvignon Blanc at the end of a hot day.
Oh, or a cold day, I would say.
And we still make the best in the world. So I mean, that's one where the reds tend to be, you know, sometimes they're really good, but you've got to pay a lot of money for a good red.
Now listen, talk to me about the wine wars going on. Delegates has launched a takeover bid for Oyster Bay, 45% of the shares they don't have.
Well, to be honest, Oyster Bay was always part of the delegates thing, and Peter Yeland's got in there and caused a bit of a stir. But the price of growing grapes has dropped dramatically, and so, as I said earlier about shares, look for companies where the share price looks really below its real value, and delegates are just mopping it up because it's so cheap. And basically they then become a bigger and larger integrated company. But I'd put delegates as a recovery stock because their brand internationally is just so strong.
Is it? So you're not afraid at all that it's going to lower the tone of Oyster Bay?
Oh, no. You don't want to. You've got Cloudy Bay, which is owned by the French, and Oyster Bay is a very strong brand in Britain.
It is. It's a very strong brand, yeah. So no worries there whatsoever.
And you've got to remember that the New Zealand wine industry is 80% controlled by international companies, really big ones. And delegates and one or two others are well below them, but they can concentrate on these export markets, and they're very good at it, Babbage and so on, and they're concentrating their margins. I mean, delegates has not lost money in the latest lot of wine. You know, there's been a lot of collapses at the bottom end of the market, but that's because they can't maintain their margins, but delegates seems to be able to do it.
And Pernod's been doing some wheeling dealing as well with Lion Nathan. What's going on there?
Oh, that's really fascinating, that one. Pernod Ricard bought Allied Domecq and ended up with wineries all around the world. But they're cheap production, and basically they want one or two strong wines from 4 countries. They've got Argentina, Spain, Australia, New Zealand. From New Zealand they want Sauvignon Blanc. In Australia they're the lowest producing wine in the world. They own Jacob's Creek among many others. So they ended up with a lot of good, strong domestic brands. for the New Zealand market and a lot of export ones, but they've had to rationalise it all. So Lion Nathan, who had one brand with the Hills, now have got basically the whole of the bottom end of the New Zealand market, and they've took 12 brands out, including Lindau, which is by far the largest selling wine made in New Zealand.
All right, well, I'll see you at the bottle shop. Thank you, gentlemen. Coming up, farm sales blues. Will Fonterra's generous payout pave the way and kickstart the rural property recovery? And could the New Zealand Superannuation Fund be the Superman who swoops down and scoops up the Crafer farms? But first, answer this. In the 3 months to September, how much did the price per hectare of land increase for dairy farms sold in New Zealand? The riddle is solved when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Talks. Just before the break, we asked you, in the 3 months to September, how much did the price per hectare increase for dairy farms sold in New Zealand? The answer? The average price per hectare increased from $29,000 to almost $53,000. The Real Estate Institute is hoping the big Fonterra payout will kick the rural property market out of its 2-year slump. Reality is that in September, only one dairy farm sold in the whole country. What do you think, James?
Oh, I think it's something we've been seeing over the past 2 years in the rural land market, and we might start to see a little bit of a pickup, but I'm not getting too excited about seeing a rush of big sales happening anytime soon. You know, there are some positive news coming out. I mean, in terms of per hectare sales, and we're at such low levels in terms of volumes that 1 or 2 sales at a low level or even at a high level can really dictate the numbers and influence them higher or lower.
The good news is, I suppose, that while the numbers were down, we're inching up what we're willing to pay for these farms. Do you think that's a trend that's likely to continue?
I think good quality farms, over the past 2 years there's been not a lot of confidence in where things are going, and volatility with the payout and that sort of thing. So we started to see we've moved into a new environment where, particularly for the dairy industry, the payout's relatively high, and that's going to fuel a little bit more confidence in going out and making big purchases. So there might be a bit more activity in terms of some of those sales there. There have been already, a lot of syndicates out there looking, and there's a lot of buyers on the sidelines that are looking for the right opportunity for it to come along. So.
And talking about big money that might be out there, Neville, let's talk about the New Zealand Superannuation Fund. They are going gangbusters, just loads of money.
Well, they certainly are, and they're putting it into world shares, which is a very sensible thing to do, because shares are going to provide, in the short term, the biggest amount of money. I think they'd be very cautious, they'd be too heavily involved in buying agricultural land in New Zealand, because this is a money for all New Zealanders, and most of us don't aim or want to own a farm. And I don't think it's anyone else's business that the state or representatives of the state should start buying up farmland.
And yet they've got, what, $17.2 billion, and they're hiring a local farm manager. They're very close to it. They say they're going to seriously look at buying up rural land, including possibly the Crafer farms.
There might be a justification in a general allocation of a portfolio to have a certain amount of property in it, but really for these sort of funds, land is usually the lowest on that priority list. And I hope they're not reacting to a whole lot of emotional rubbish about who owns farms and foreigners and that sort of thing.
Is it emotional rubbish?
Oh yes, definitely.
Why? Tell me.
Oh look, as we've heard, there's so few farms being sold in New Zealand, and the Crafers are a little bit of an exception. Actually, it proved how stupid banks can be, but and the Chinese saw an opportunity. But these may well be, and we don't really know a lot about it, and that's one of the problems with the Chinese company as to whether it's private individuals doing this, in which case I don't see any problem, or whether it's the arm of the Chinese government behind it, in which case there might be a need to worry, but they're very small in the overall scheme of things.
Okay, James, let's talk about wool prices now. They are rocketing ahead. How is the industry doing, really? We see WPI is launching a cooperative, allegedly, at the end of the month.
Yeah, I mean, the industry in general has still got a lot of issues to work through, I think. But prices have increased significantly through this year, and that's probably a combination of lower supply and some increases in demand. So I think the story for wool is good, as long as we can get that story right. When you consider some of the other fabrics around the world, cotton in particular, then prices for cotton have increased, and
prices for nylon have increased as well.
That's right. So I think we've got the sustainability sort of aura around wool as a fibre. I think that's going to be good down the track. It's just I'm not getting too excited about big increases in prices just yet, but you know, I think there are some positive influence coming about.
Neville, if you had the ear of the wool industry and you were sitting at your kitchen table with them, what would you honestly say to them? What's your best advice?
Oh, it's one that I try and ignore, actually, because having followed the rural industries, it was hard enough dealing with the meat industry, but the wool industry is even. And I'd say, well, just leave them to it. There's a lot of individual thinkers there, and out of that has come some quite strong and innovative companies, and they latch on to various niche markets, be they in Italy or in China. And I think they don't need to all collect together like a big Fonterra. That'd be the worst thing that could happen, I think.
Interesting. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Fascinating as always. And I hope, Neville, you stay out of jail. Thanks to my guests, ASB Rural Economist James Shortall and National Business Review Editor Nevil Gibson. We'd love to hear your feedback, so drop me a line on our website. And remember to check out my weekly blog. We'll give the last word to Farmville. It's an insanely popular online game shared among 59 million Facebook users and a big hit with board office workers worldwide who dream of a life on the land. Thanks to an investigation by the Wall Street Journal, Facebook is furiously tightening its privacy controls. It seems the esteemed newspaper discovered that games like Farmville on the social network are forwarding people's names and other identifying details, and sometimes the details of their friends, to advertisers and data collection companies, who then on-sell the personal information. Facebook says it's dealing to the problem. Good to know. Keep the faith. See you next time.